Hello and welcome to Consciously Awesome Living here on Soulivity TV. I hope you are having an amazing day, and I'm so glad you're here with me because I'm really looking forward to talking to all of you. I have had something going on in my mind for the last several days, and I just want to share it because I think that so many of you who listen are going to really relate to this. And it fits in so nicely with Solivity's motto of passion, purpose, living. And so here's what I'm talking about. It all starts with Van Gogh. I went to see Beyond Van Gogh a few days ago. Now, it was actually the second time that I saw this exhibit. Now, if you don't know what that is, first of all, Van Gogh is one of the famous post-impressional artists. And so you might, if you recognize the Starry Night or the sunflowers, that's Van Gogh. And if you haven't seen it on social media, because I know the algorithm, some people are seeing it all the time, some people aren't, but there's this exhibit that's been going around the United States, at least. I'm not sure if it's in other countries yet. And it's like an immersion into Van Gogh, where between the art that we can do now with computer generated visuals, as far as projections, and then of course the art of Van Gogh, you get to step into the world of his paintings. Now, when I was in Seattle, not only that's when I saw it the first time, because the exhibits were a little bit different in each of the places that I saw it. It was such an incredible meditative experience for me. I went alone and I started to learn about Van Gogh, that things that I hadn't really thought of before. I don't know if you do know Van Gogh a little bit, you might recognize him as the one that they say he cut off his own ear and he committed suicide and he lived this difficult life. And that's part of what I've been obsessing about as we think about this. But let me just keep going to when I was in the experience of this. They project his images all around these big screens, and you sit in it, in the center of it. And in one of them we stood in the other. Even that, the different in perspective between being on the floor looking up at these or standing in them was so amazingly different in experience. But as I was learning more about him, and this time going through and listening, reading the quotes of his, and one of them was talking about how he didn't feel like a success in society. I couldn't find the quote when I got home to give you the exact quote, but it was like, in the way of business, I'm not a success, but I have to follow my passion, and that's what I'm good at, kind of. As a really crude remembrance of that quote, but that piece of it is one of the things that stood with me, because when you learn about him and then looking at so many other people who have influenced our lives so incredibly, impactfully for thousands of years, because they was in the or hundreds of years, um, then we come to understand that their lives, they weren't even known very well when they were alive. And that's the piece. The couple of pieces that really stood with me was that intersection of the fact that basically he was saying what a lot of people feel like they're faced with right now. If you are a business owner or trying to take your passion and put it into a business, which, at least in my world, a lot of people are doing. And I think that with the internet and then with the pandemic bringing us home into our homes, we've been doing, there's so many more people who are attempting to match their passion with their business and to create a living from it, which I think is a wonderful thing to do. I think we should all be living our passion in every moment, and that purpose, that need to get something out. I know I'm always driven about wanting to help people experience the higher levels of consciousness, because for me, it's made such a difference to see the world in a new way. I think that artists and poets, and I mean, we're all artists, right? Um, so many people have formed what we see as the standard of art and poetry and writing. And we're comparing ourselves to them on some level, right? I want to be a success, and we're putting our own success ideals of what our society deems successful right now into this desire to follow our passion. And I think there can be a conflict a lot of times with that. So that piece has been stirring around inside of me. And let me tell you a little bit more about what I know about Van Gogh now. Um, that I've gone to these exhibits and then did a little more looking into it. But he only sold one painting while he was alive. He has over 1,000 paintings that he did in 10 years. I think they calculated it, and that meant that he did 4 paintings a week for this period of time. And these paintings are now worth tens of millions of dollars, some of them at least. And yet he was in poverty, relying on his family, who didn't feel like he was a success. He had a brother that supported him tremendously. And then we tell the story of him having been the one who basically, the tortured artist archetype that so many of us have, or a storyline that I know has continued on because I've worked with people as their mentor and their coach. I've worked with actors and artists and writers who continue to live in a sense of torturedness and a life of pain and torture, in part because they're afraid if they let go of that, their art will not exist anymore. They won't have that art that comes through them, that it comes from the pain. And that story originated with Van Gogh. And as I looked into this and thought of it from a different angle, and learned a little bit more. Partly it's because the torturedness is he was in a mental institution. He didn't have financial success. He had multiple love relationships, but not one lifelong partner. He supposedly cut his ear off in rage, and yet there is also evidence now that they are considering that it was, first of all, it was only the earlobe, it was only part of the ear, and he had a very deep, passionate soul relationship with another man who was a good swordsman. And the one idea right now is that he actually was in a fight, was the ear was sliced off by the other, and then to cover that up so that he wouldn't go to jail, they said that it was him that did it to himself. And then they also talk about him having committed suicide at 37 and how devastating this is. And that's part of this archetype that we've been living with. And it turns out there is also evidence that he was killed, that he was shot by someone else. And the evidence that goes along with the story of suicide actually doesn't fit. It's not all there. There's some gaps in that idea. So here we have this story of a man who was so tortured that he committed suicide and now is one of our greatest artists. And we as a humanity have artists and have carried on that sense of we need to constantly have a problem, constantly have devastation. It makes us better, that tortured energy. I mean, even Jesus was killed on a cross, right? Like that energy of the beautiful ones are tortured and they are not seen during their lifetime, and they um, have devastation. And I think that that story is something that we need to shift and that we can shift. And I want to talk about that today. But I also want to just point out that it's not just Van Gogh that did it. I just mentioned Jesus, has the story that of the crucifixion. But when we move back to the artists, Monet has a similar story. Monet is another artist with the lilies who's very well known now, was not accepted into the art community when he was alive, also had many times when he was penniless. And his family wanted him to fit the norms of society. They wanted him to take over the grocery store, the greengrocers that they had as a family business. And they were upset that he refused to give up his art. In fact, he ended up in a war because he refused to give up his art. His father, who was in a position that could have gotten him out of the draft, said that he would only do that if Monet gave up his art, and he refused to do that, and therefore he served in a war. So all of these artists that we look at, and I think of Emily Dickinson, also known poet, Edgar Allan Poe, all of these people who followed their passion so deeply and with such reverence that they stepped outside of the norms of society. And I guess I did that too, when I left the mainstream job. And so many people during this time of change are wanting to find a purpose, follow a passion, and to live a life that is successful. And so this sort of break from the norm, this sense of we need a new way. It is very difficult to sometimes completely fulfill your passion and live by your full truth, and at the same time navigate society and feel like a success in a society that doesn't match who you are. And I think that for me, why I wanted to bring this up as a topic with all of you who listen, is that I've seen this. I've seen this in so many people, and I encourage people to follow their passions. And I'm not saying you need to be poor. That's the whole point. No matter what we believe our story to be, it's going to be told the way it's going to be told when we're dead and gone, right? It's told the way the people believe it, whether we're feeling that truth or not, even while we're alive. Everyone will have their own opinion and their own impression of us and the choices we make. So if we go through life trying to please others and fit in, if that creates torment within us, if that doesn't feel right to us, then we're only hurting ourselves, and we're not gifting the world with what we feel we came for. And that can be simple. There is nothing wrong if Van Gogh wanted to follow his family business. He tried a lot of businesses actually and failed in those prior to the painting, and really without ever becoming successful in the earth terms at that time. But if you are someone who wants to follow a family business, or is very good at the business side of things, and that's your passion, that's amazing. And if it fits in with society, that's wonderful. I am not condemning that at all. In fact, when you look back at Van Gogh, his brother, who did fit into the business side of the art industry and in business in general, fit in, he is the one that often supported Vincent van Gogh. And it was his wife and child who brought the Van Gogh paintings to the world after Van Gogh had died. So being in that structure, we have two choices, right? There's the people that fit in the structure and they can support the people who don't. if they choose to. And then together, that partnership can help people move forward. But if you are someone who is finding it difficult to fit in the world as it is, maybe consider changing not yourself, but the world, right? Following your own path and letting that impact the world, as so many of these have done. I'm going to really dive into that aspect of it with you as soon as we get back from this quick break.
We work so hard sometimes. Isn't it time for a break? Take a walk or enjoy nature or maybe a leap or a ride or even a dip. Spending time with a friend or some time alone. Whatever it is, always spend time growing and learning with a Soulivity weekend. Every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on Soulivity TV.
Soulivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing want to remind you about the importance of continuing to follow public health guidelines to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Please continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Please visit these sites for further information about how to stay safe from COVID-19 into the new year. Remember, love protects us.
Welcome back. All right, so we are talking about all the, I think I just let you into my brain and all the swirling that's been going on in my head since visiting the Van Gogh exhibit recently. But we're talking about, you know, if we don't fit into the world, what do we do? Do we, some people have conflict moving into that space of just compromising in ways that keep them in the world and fitting in. It just doesn't work for them. So I want to quote something. So I came home from that exhibit, and I think it was later that day or the next day that I saw that the marvelous Mrs. Maisel had just put up the beginning of season 4. I don't know if you have watched that, but it's about a comedian, a woman comedian, um, I think in the 50s, trying to make it. And so because spirit is always here telling us exactly what we need in the moment, I came home, I watched the show, and I have a quote that I want to read for you from this. She has just been ostracized and kicked out. She was getting some success as a comedian. And then every time she just does her own thing, and then she ends up getting in trouble. And so this is what she says. She says, "You know what's great about me? It's when I'm me. So why would I wait until I have enough power to say to them, I want to be me? What if they never let me be me? I want to be me every time I walk out on that stage. I'm going to do this. If I'm going to do this," and she talks about giving up her time with her kids. "If I'm going to do this, I'm going to say exactly what is on my mind." And then her manager says, "But that's not how the business works." And she answers with, "Let's change the business then." So that is what, to me, I came from this idea that if we truly want to be ourselves, if we truly want to live in our authentic self, follow our passion in every moment, and the world doesn't fit that, well, let's be honest. The world right now, maybe always, just doesn't fit being authentic in every moment. It's not the norm. Our norm in society for at least most of the major cultures that we know about has been to hide your truth, to fit in. It's been about fitting in with a hierarchy, with a community, uh, as the norm is, with the mainstream. And when someone comes along and chooses to be themselves in every moment, then it creates havoc because it creates change. Maybe, and I didn't watch on the episodes anymore. You'll have to watch that show yourself to find out what happens and how she changes it. But maybe, just maybe, being ourselves, following our passion and our purpose can remodel the world. And maybe we won't see it in our lifetime. Maybe it won't happen for centuries from now. Maybe we will never be known for what we have done to change things. But each one of us in the collective consciousness who follows their truth in each moment will impact the world in a way that is unprecedented. And there's something that I listen to Bo of the Fifth Column. It's a YouTube channel who I like. And I always like when people are so extremely different in the world than I am, living their life and doing something so different than what I do. And yet, to me, so much the same, have the same perspective, have the same ideas, and approaching it from such a different way. But anyway, he always says, given enough time, we will evolve because that's what happens. Evolution is evolution. And so when he's talking about politics or racism or suppression of any kind, he always falls back to, in a long enough timeline, the progressives will win. The people who are progressing, evolving, moving forward, pushing past the norm always win out. So if we can remember that and remember that the collective of who we are, if we are collective, we are part of oneness, we are connected to everyone around the world, but not just in this moment, everyone who ever has been and everyone who ever will be. And we are a part of that evolution and that wholeness when we follow our truth in each moment and be true to ourselves to the best of our ability. And being true to yourself may not mean jumping off the mainstream. Being true to yourself and living on the edge financially may not be for you. And that's okay too. When I say this, and I'm talking about it springboarding off of the greats, right? The people who are well known, they didn't know that they were doing that at the time. They were just following their passion and their truth. Another quote that I saw with Van Gogh was that something to the effect that I could do without God, but I could not do without a power that is greater than me. And I think, to me, I interpreted it, I could do without the story that religion tells us, or the combination of God's perception, that can be reducing, but he doesn't care maybe exactly what it looks like, but something. There is a greater force. There is a dream within his dream. And that piece of knowing that in each one of these cases, it's the following your own truth and it's knowing that there is something bigger. So to be unapologetically you, whatever that is, do what you love, and it doesn't have to be your moneymaker. If you love something, it's great if it's your career, and it's great if it's not. Just do it. Do the things you love, make them a priority in your life, and fulfill that passion within yourself, no matter what. I mean, you do you. If that's not you, don't do it. But my suggestion is follow that. And if your passion is to just sit and look at the stars at night, do that. It doesn't have to be grand, it just has to be yours. And then I was thinking about the people in each one of these cases that I was looking at, of people who struggled in life and then were able to, it ended up being known and considered one of the greatest of all time following their death. Each one of them had another person or two that supported them, who saw them, who held them, whether it was financially or with encouragement or love or food. I don't know what it was, but just that ability to honor their path. And so maybe if you're fitting in the mainstream more and you have the means, you support somebody that you believe in that other people aren't seeing. And that again can be with a compliment, a reminder. But you can do this. You can be authentic and you can be true. And together we can change the world. And remember, you do not control your narrative of how people view your life when it's over. So as much as you try to fit in, as much as you try to keep the image that you think is right to be projected into society, people are going to tell their stories and they're going to tell them their own way. There are so many letters that Van Gogh wrote that they've pulled most of the story about him from. And yet, even within that, there's an uncertainty of truth because it's still through the eyes of the people who read it before. So, do you let that speak for itself, whatever it is? And then I like to give you one more visual, one more um, tool, right? I talked to you before about my magic backpack that I give the people who take the consciously awesome Gnostic adventure. So they have their tools to go along their journey. Well, we're going to take that backpack and we're going to pull out the violet flame. So imagine this beautiful, beautiful violet flame, multicolored shades of violet rising up. It's warm on the cold days, it's cool on the hot days. You can sit in it. You can imagine that you're sitting in it. You can imagine it filling your home. You can imagine it filling the world, the government, anything. It's called the transmuting violet flame. This is an energy that's been held in the metaphysical fields for thousands of years, and people have drawn on this, and it has a frequency, it has a vibration, and it will transmute what we consider the negative into the positive and help things take their most positive form. That is even a way to change our world, to make it fit you better, just by simply imagining that violet flame filling your space, filling the world, filling the internet, whatever it is. And if you really want to zap something, my dear friend used to say that he was using the violet flaminator and he would just throw it if you want to zap something and help it transmute. And you can just use these tools that we talk about, these higher connections, to fill you up on your path and lean on people and support people, because those two things will help us be ourselves authentically, and in that will allow us to change the world and remodel it to one that maybe in the next generations fits better. So take that with you. Let me know what your passions are. You can use the comments or write to me at sheila@applegate.com is my website. You can send me an email. I want to know. I want to know how you're viewing the world and how that is supporting you and how you would like to be supported. And we can offer that up for each other. Have a beautiful day, and I will see you again next week.